Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for this Test Drive UAT User Acceptance webinar. Today we'll be talking you through Test Drive UAT and specifically the key changes in the latest release. I'm Sarah Ponsford and I'm the Head of Product Management, and taking you through this webinar will be my colleague Tim Bauer, who's our Senior Solutions Consultant. So let's talk briefly about some of the challenges that we're trying to address with user acceptance testing, because I know that some people on this webinar will have seen TestDrive-UAT and used it before, and then for others of you it will be completely new. So user acceptance testing is a key component to any new software delivery, but it comes with many challenges because most of the time that testing is done by business users who actually have another job to perform all day long. And so it becomes very difficult to make available those key staff, particularly the ones with the most expertise, because they're often the most valuable members of their team and have lots of other demands on their time. Also, another challenge is to ensure that enough coverage is done of the new capabilities, the new functionality being delivered, and to ensure that all aspects of that new delivery are indeed tested. And finally, the documentation of what's been done and the management of that is an additional challenge for the QA team or the IT manager who is overseeing all of this activity. It can be quite difficult to know what areas have been covered, what haven't, and what issues have been identified. So these are some of the challenges that TestDrive-UAT is aiming to address. We want to help user acceptance testers be much more thorough in what they're doing and more effective by giving them the tools with which to perform that activity. We also want this process to be quicker for everybody so that we can release up their time and they can get back to their day-to-day jobs. Also, ultimately, of course, the whole aim of user acceptance testing is to place fewer issues into our live software. Now, as a bonus of this process and of using TestDrive-UAT within this, we can also create other materials that can be used for training and system documentation amongst other things, and we will show you some of that as we go through. We will also be looking very briefly at how we can help you to organise these tests and the results of those with something called Qualify. Tim will show you that in just a moment. And this is how all of this fits in. Qualify sits in the middle and is the management platform, and then TestDrive-UAT is in the top left. That is what you would use for user acceptance testing. We have other solutions for the other aspects of the testing world, but we are not intending to cover any of those today. So at that point, I will hand back over to Tim, who is going to show you some of this in action.
Excellent, thank you, Sarah. So as Sarah said, we're just going to start very briefly with the planning and management side of UAT, move very quickly into TestDrive-UAT itself. And what I'm going to do is just to run through a little example of planning a test. In this case, it's going to be an end-to-end test, that kind of business process test, if you like. So all I'm doing is adding some tasks into this particular end-to-end test, things that need to be run and run in sequence. I will also assign these to people. So I'll assign the first one to me. I can assign the second one to tester 1, and so on. I won't do them all. And then as the test manager, once I'm happy with what it is that's going to be tested and how it's going to be tested and who's going to be tested, I can make that available for execution. Okay. As I said, in this particular instance, this is an end-to-end test, but this could also just be a grouping of independent tests that need to be run. So when I start it, that task is marked as ready. So if I just switch hats now and become the tester as opposed to the test manager, I will have been notified of this. It could have been an email, it will appear in my work list, whatever. I know I need to work on it and I'm ready to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just to notify the test manager that I'm working on that. And then all I need to do is to execute this. And this is where TestDrive-UAT comes into play. And I select the application that I want to be testing with. And TestDrive-UAT will pop up on the side of my screen. And you will notice that we will also receive in TestDrive-UAT a list of the steps that were associated with the test case that I used in order to create that task. You don't have to have that. Of course, you may be simply relying upon the knowledge of the business person to perform that testing, in which case, obviously, we wouldn't get those steps. And then as a tester, all I need to do is to follow through the process. If I am working with steps, I can check off those steps as I run through them. I'll cheat a little bit and get, bear with me, my keyboard has gone mad on me. There you go. So fill in first name, and the address, and I need a card number. And then I can register the card. So in this particular case, I've got a step that's suggesting I should go and check the balance and the discounts. Again, you may not have those, but the tester might also recognize the fact that there is some incorrect information being shown on the screen here. So I'll fail that step. What I'm going to want to do also is to document that issue. So if I switch into the test view of TestDrive-UAT, you can see that it's been capturing everything that I've been doing. It's been taking pictures of the application, it's highlighting, hopefully you can see on those little screen thumbnails, what I did and where I did it. And that also means that I can add something we call markup to the screens. And that's just simply dragging a box around an area of the screen that I'm unhappy with or that I want to bring to somebody's attention and add a comment. In this case, I'm going to flag this as an error. And I can see only 3 discounts should be 4. Now, incidentally, at this point in time, we can also raise an issue or a defect, depending on how you like to work, but I'd probably raise an issue at this point. And that would also create an issue record back into Qualify that would be linked to the task that I performed and eventually be associated with the results of this test. Okay? So it gives the tester the ability to raise all of this information at one go. Okay? So I finished doing what I need to do. So a couple of things left for me to do as a tester. Firstly, to save these results. So I will do that. It will create a result set for me. I can add a reference or a description. I can pass or fail this. I will fail this and click Save. And all of that information will now be saved back into Qualify. Okay. Oh, sorry, wrong task. So if I go here, you can see here there is a set of results associated with this task, which we will look at in just a moment. And then as the last job for me to do as the tester is to change the status of this to say it's completed. Should probably do failed. I'm actually going to mark it as passed so that I can show you a particular capability within Qualify that can help with the communication and getting things done quickly. And it's the fact that when a previous task has been flagged as completed and accepted, if you like, then the next one is automatically made ready. Tester 1 will be notified. Okay. So let's open up these results and take a look at them. So as I said earlier, that set of results is associated with the task. It will also be associated with any issue or defect that we raised. That issue or defect will also be associated with the task. So there's full traceability in the background. I'll just simplify this view for you. So in here, we have all of the information that was gathered when we were performing the test. Some helpful information, like a little bit of information about the machine I'm running on, the application that we're testing, in this case it's a browser, and then, as we've seen, the details of what I did in order to perform the test. And also, when we get to the screen where we had the markup added, and you can see a little error icon against the screen, I can open up the markup. So that's nice and simple. We also may wish to get this information out in other forms. So this is where changes to TestDrive-UAT appear. Previously, we had a report button that generated a Word document. We had the ability, if you right-clicked in the right place in the results, you could get animation. But all of that is now in one place. And we have three options. Save to disk saves the results as a little result file that you can then distribute and open up with the result viewer again. More importantly, the Word document, now much more in keeping with the reporting from the rest of the TestDrive family, TestDrive Assist and TestDrive, where we have the ability to provide a report title. We can style the report, and there are a number. Here you can create your own templates in Word to include here so that you can customize and brand your reports if you like. We also have now some features to better improve the way that we show inputs. Now, for those of you who haven't seen TestDrive-UAT before, this probably doesn't mean anything to you, but we'll have a look at it in a moment. For those of you who have and have experienced issues where, for example, you clicked in the middle of some blank space in a screen or whatever, and in the report, the input shows as a fuzzy picture of the whole screen. Okay? So now we can elect how we like to show those inputs. So input element zoomed, which means we zoom in on that element to the top left. So in the thumbnail, the element you clicked on will be to the top left. Probably the most important one is the input point, where we use where you clicked or where you keyed information in as the center of the input thumbnail, So it gives you some reference, but it also shows the relevance of where it is you're doing something. And obviously you can change the size of those thumbnail images. Also a whole bunch of options here. Do you want a cover page, table of contents, etc.? If you're using test steps, whether or not you need those, the markups, and also, you know, whether you want to include the inputs or not, and if you do, whether you want to draw a rectangle around the input or not. Okay, and the rectangle, as shown here, is this big red thing. If I selected something underneath, much more appropriate, you can see the red icon. Let's go back to the reporting there. Finally, the last option is animation. So all of the reporting options in one place. So let's take a look at the example of a Word document. This one has a template applied to it, so it is branded. Now whether you like the gold original bakery up there or not is another matter. So for those of you who are not familiar with the reporting at all, things like a table of contents and then a description of what the test execution looked like. So we do have full page screen images, and then we have all of the inputs that have been made. So you can see someone clicking on an item, keying a value in, it's highlighted, and so on. Okay, here's a good example of the focus of the input thumbnail being changed slightly to put the focus in the center of the element or the where the input was made. Okay, now being a Word document, obviously we've also got the ability to modify this if we like. So if you don't want to include things like clicks into the username text box, very simple thing for me to delete that out of my report. The markups also appear. Here we can see a markup highlighting a blank area of the screen, just saying it'd be nice to have a postcode address lookup in here. So perhaps using TestDrive-UAT not only to report issues, but perhaps to raise enhancement requests, suggestions, etc., documenting some requirements. Okay. So let's come on to the animation. So I also have an animation that I opened up here. Nothing much in the way of changes in the animation in this particular release of TestDrive-UAT, but for those of you who are not familiar with it, again, something that you can customize and brand, and simply it's a simulation, if you like, of what it was that we did. So it has some titles, description if you want it. A lot of our customers will use this for creating little training guides. How do I enter an order into the system? How do I log in? Whatever it may be. And then it steps through and shows you on the screen what it was that the tester did during that test, as well as showing the markups, which you, again in here you can add to and amend, okay, and then save everything off once you're happy with it. Okay, so a little example of animation. So just to be clear and just to summarize, TestDrive-UAT, for those of you who are not familiar with it, its purpose really is to aid with the documentation of a test execution. And as its name suggests, it's particularly aimed at user acceptance testing. Why is that? Well, TestDrive-UAT is very lightweight, it's very easy to use, it doesn't really place any overhead on what the tester is doing. Sole job, capture what they're doing, provide the ability to save that information. That information could support an issue or a defect. It could provide evidence of testing, and it can also be used when, particularly when things go well, or if they're testing new areas of the application, can be used to provide the basis for training guides, little videos, etc., to help other people learn the system. From a changes standpoint, the changes are really focused around the reporting, making it easier to find animation, reporting, saving to disk now, and all of the options that we have for creating a Word document. And of course it will remember your preferences. If you turn a whole bunch of things off, the next time you come in, those things will be off again. So, you know, easy to have your standard preferred format for reporting. Okay, so that's pretty much what we had to show you today. So let me hand back to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was really very helpful, and hopefully it's given everyone an insight into not only the capabilities of TestDrive-UAT, but also the changes that we've made in the latest release for those of you who have used TestDrive-UAT before. So what I'd like to do now is open this up to questions. If anyone has anything that they would like to ask us, any questions about user acceptance testing in general, TestDrive-UAT capabilities, or indeed anything else that you've seen today or you would like to know, please just type your question into the questions panel, and then we will answer that as effectively as we can.
Sarah, a question that's just come in. So we showed TestDrive-UAT running with Qualify. Does it have to do that? Is it something you can use on its own?
No, that's a really good question, actually. TestDrive-UAT actually has two modes. So it can be used in conjunction with Qualify, and that helps a lot with the management of the testing activity, the storing of results and defects, etc. But it can also be run in standalone mode, which means that it can be run in isolation. Your results will then get saved in files to disk. You can still create the animations, but the results won't get saved into Qualify and you don't launch it from there. But it can just as effectively be used in that mode, yes.
Thank you. So something else. If input is not selected in the Word document, or when you save those results, does that mean the report will not show any of the inputs at all? I'm just trying to understand the question a little bit. In such a case, would it be great for companies who are heavily regulated? Okay, I think I understand that question. Yeah, it's a good point. In TestDrive-UAT, you can also elect what it is that you want to save. You can also mask input. And I think the question here is around what happens if there is sensitive information on the screen that perhaps you don't want to include. So there are methods there for excluding things from the results. So if there is a screen that has some particularly sensitive information on or something, then that can be excluded from the results and ultimately the reports that you generate.
Okay, we have a couple of other questions here as well. One is, what technology can TestDrive-UAT be used over? And that's a case of almost any technology. It can be used over all of the standard web browsers and client-server applications as well. And one other one, can it integrate with other task management solutions such as Visual Studio Team services? Well, the answer is that yes, if you have it in fully integrated mode, so for example with Qualify, then we have plugin integration with many other solutions. So the answer is yes. So if you choose to manage your tasks, for example, in something else such as Jira and TFS, etc., then we can use that information from there. We can store results against those items, and we can even add defects to there if that's the application which holds your defect management.
Excellent. Couple more. Can you remind us which version of Qualify and TestDrive-UAT you are using to demo? Yes. So the version that we've been using today is the release that is named as YC1. Although a number of the changes to TestDrive-UAT came out in the YB release stream, but that's what we've been using, YC, which is the latest. Another question, how much training is required to use this? Good question. Typically with our customers, a kind of a user acceptance testing workshop will be something between half a day and a day. So principally showing people where to find their work, how to execute it, how to save their results. Can I get a trial? Actually, interestingly, yes, you can. We do have a trial of TestDrive-UAT. It's the standalone version. It's somewhat locked down, but it can be very useful to get a good feel for how it works and what it does, but it's going to limit you to what you can get out of it in the way of reporting, etc. Does the solution integrate with identity management solutions such as Active Directory? So the answer to that is also yes. Again, when working with Qualify, there is a notion of logging in to Qualify, and that can be controlled by Active Directory.
And what I think might be the final question, with TestDrive-UAT, how can you test or document a full workflow involving multiple applications? Well, once you have TestDrive-UAT open, if you want to monitor a different application, perhaps one that is launched from the one you're working on or the next piece in your regression test workflow, then you simply click on the monitor option, choose another application, and the audit trail and the documentation will simply continue. So it's absolutely no problem to test multiple applications within one test flow.
And one more question. Is the solution deployed on-premise or a cloud-based solution? In principle, it is an on-premise solution. TestDrive-UAT needs to be sat on the desktop where the user interface of the application under test is running. However, it can be launched from Qualify running as a web application. So typically our customers will either have a fully on-premise installation with the repository stored on-premise and software installed, but some of them do run with the repository and a web application hosted somewhere like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure, but it is not something that we provide as software as a service. So, you know, it's kind of fully on-premise or private cloud, if you like.
Okay, I think that's all of our questions for the moment. I'm just double checking that we haven't missed anything, but I think that's all of them right now. So I would just like at this point to say thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope that's been informative and that you've enjoyed the webinar. Our email address and website is on screen now. If you think of anything else that you would like to ask us, then by all means contact us. And like I said at the beginning, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar as well after this session. So finally, thank you to Tim, and thank you for everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.